Ethan had always found comfort in the quiet hum of the ship. The Artemis, a massive intergalactic exploration vessel, had become his home for the past 6 months. It was a place of order where every circuit, every control panel, and every wire had its place. As a young engineer, Ethan spent his days fixing small glitches and ensuring everything ran smoothly. There was a certain predictability to it all, until that one fateful day. Ethan had been in the ship's control room, crouched beneath a console and fiddling with the wiring. It was one of those minor repairs that had become routine. His fingers moved with the precision of someone who had done this thousands of times before. The ship's artificial gravity hummed softly in the background, and the low hum of the ventilation system was the only sound that filled the room. But today, something was different. Ethan felt it in the air, an unusual tension, as though the entire ship was holding its breath. He paused for a moment, listening intently, but all he could hear was the usual steady hum of the ship. Shrugging it off, he continued his work, his hands moving quickly as he twisted the wiring into place. Without realizing it, Ethan shifted slightly to the right. His hand, reaching for a tool, brushed against something unexpected, or rather someone. His fingers made contact with the soft fabric of what seemed like a uniform, and before he could even react, his hand slipped lower, brushing against something entirely more surprising, an alien's body. It was a brief touch, a split second, but it was enough to make Ethan freeze in place. The room fell silent. Ethan's mind went blank for a moment and his heart raced in his chest. His first thought was that he had accidentally touched one of the Zarek, the alien species that was on board the Artemis for diplomatic purposes. The Zarek were known for their beautiful, iridescent skin and their calm, composed nature. They were a peaceful race, respected throughout the galaxy, and their presence aboard the Artemis was a step toward greater cooperation between humanity and the galactic community. Ethan immediately pulled his hand back, his face burning with embarrassment. He didn't know if he should apologize or just pretend it never happened. He felt the heat of a flush spreading up his neck and across his cheeks. His gaze dropped to the floor, avoiding eye contact as he mumbled an apology. "I'm so sorry," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to," before he could finish. The figure he had accidentally touched turned around. Ethan's eyes flicked upward and he saw a tall woman standing before him. She was a Zarek, of course. Her skin shimmered with an otherworldly sheen, a soft, almost translucent glow that made her seem as if she were made of starlight. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, a flowing, metallic fabric that rippled with every movement. Her long, silver hair framed her face in loose waves, and her golden eyes met his with an expression that was far from angry. Instead of the cold glare Ethan had expected, the alien woman smiled. It was a warm, knowing smile, one that seemed to carry a mix of amusement and understanding. Her eyes glimmered with curiosity as she looked at him, her lips curling ever so slightly. "It's all right," she said softly, her voice melodic and calming. "Your species is still getting used to being in space." Ethan blinked, his mouth slightly agape. He had expected her to be offended, perhaps even angry at the accidental touch, but instead she was remarkably calm. He tried to compose himself, but his mind was racing. How was he supposed to react? Should he laugh it off or apologize again? "I didn't mean to, he trailed off, unsure of how to continue. Words failed him as he stood there, awkwardly shifting from one foot to the other. The woman's smile remained, and she stepped a little closer. Her presence was almost overwhelming in its calmness, as though she could disarm any tension with nothing more than a glance. She tilted her head slightly, as if intrigued by his reaction. "It's all right, human," she said, the word human rolling off her tongue with a gentle cadence. "It was just an accident, wasn't it?" Ethan nodded, still unable to find his voice. His heart was still racing and he felt like an idiot. What kind of first impression was this? accidentally touching an alien and now standing here like a fool. But the woman's gaze softened, and there was no trace of judgment in her eyes. I understand, she continued, that this is new to you. You've never shared your space with other species before. Ethan's mind clicked into place. She wasn't just a random alien, she was a diplomat. The Zarek had been working with humanity to bridge the gap between the different species in the galaxy. The fact that she was here aboard the Artemis meant she was important, likely part of a larger intergalactic effort. I thank you, Ethan said finally, his voice a little more steady. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to invade your space. The woman's smile deepened. You didn't invade anything. You simply stumbled upon me, and I find that interesting. Ethan furrowed his brow. Interesting? Yes, she said, her voice calm and collected. Your species is unpredictable but also fascinating. You think in ways that other races don't. You act on emotion, on impulse, without thinking too much about the consequences. That's something the Zarek don't fully understand, but we're learning. We're learning a lot from you. Ethan blinked, caught off guard by her words. He had never expected an alien to compliment humanity, especially in such a direct way. His mind began to wander. Was she trying to flatter him? Or was she genuinely interested in human behavior? Before he could respond, the woman introduced herself. My name is Lyra, she said, her golden eyes studying him with a curious intensity. And you are? Ethan, he replied. Ethan Carter, I'm an engineer on the ship. Lyra nodded as though she already knew that. Ethan, you'll be seeing more of me, I think. We're aboard the same ship for a reason. Ethan was about to ask what that reason was when the ship's loudspeaker suddenly crackled to life. The voice of the ship's captain boomed through the intercom, interrupting their conversation. Attention, all crew members. Please report to your stations. We have detected an incoming ship, hostile identification. All hands to battle stations. Lyra's expression immediately shifted from friendly curiosity to focused professionalism. Her golden eyes flashed with a sudden intensity and she straightened, her posture becoming more rigid. I see, she said quietly. The time for diplomacy may be over for now. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He had been so caught up in the unexpected encounter that he had forgotten about the dangers of space. The Skravok, a hostile alien faction, had been known to attack ships without warning, and their tactics were merciless. Lyra gave him a final, reassuring look. Don't worry, Ethan, she said, her voice filled with confidence. You're not alone. We will handle this. Ethan stood there, his heart still pounding, as the loudspeaker blared through the ship's corridors. The voice of Captain Ives, commanding and unwavering, echoed in every corner of the Artemis. All crew members report to your stations. We have detected an incoming ship, hostile identification. All hands to battle stations. For a moment, everything felt like it was frozen in time. The words sank into Ethan's mind, and a heavy tension hung in the air. He hadn't expected this. He had been so caught up in his conversation with Lyra, the diplomat from the Zarek species, that the sudden reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. Lyra, however, didn't seem fazed. Her expression shifted instantly from the calm curiosity she had been showing just moments before to one of sharp focus. Her posture stiffened, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She looked every bit the trained diplomat, and yet Ethan could sense that there was much more to her than her peaceful demeanor let on. Come with me, Lyra said, her voice low and commanding. There was no hesitation in her tone. She turned quickly, her silvery hair catching the light as she moved, and began walking toward the nearest lift. Without thinking, Ethan followed. He wasn't sure why he was going with her. Maybe it was the lingering feeling of uncertainty about the ship's safety, or maybe it was the sheer awe he felt when in Lyra's presence. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It was as though she carried an energy within her that made everything else seem insignificant. She wasn't just a diplomat. Ethan had a growing sense that she was more. And whatever it was, he knew it could make the difference in whatever was to come. As they moved through the corridors, Ethan's mind raced. The Artemis was humanity's pride, a symbol of their advancement in space exploration. But now, the very ship that had become his home was in danger. The Skravok, a ruthless species known for their hostility and lack of mercy, were approaching. Ethan had heard the rumors about them, their brutal raids, the way they took no prisoners. No one could deny that the Skravok were one of the most feared factions in the galaxy. But as he followed Lyra, he felt an odd sense of calm. She wasn't in a hurry, wasn't panicking like everyone else. It was as if she knew exactly what to do, exactly how to handle this threat. They arrived at the bridge within minutes. The room was buzzing with activity, and the crew was already in full combat mode. Officers rushed to their stations, their faces tense, eyes focused on the control panels. Captain Ives stood near the front barking orders, but when he saw Lyra enter, he paused for just a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in her presence. "Lyra," Captain Ives said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of caution. "I didn't expect you here. This is a military operation, not a diplomatic one." Lyra gave him a calm, almost apologetic smile. "I understand, Captain, but my people are well versed in dealing with threats like the Skravok. I can help." Ethan couldn't help but wonder what exactly she meant by that. The Zarek were known for their intelligence, their diplomacy, and their peaceful nature, but they were also a highly advanced species. Had they dealt with the Skravok before? What made her so confident? Captain Ives studied her for a moment before nodding. "All right. You're free to assist, but we'll be in charge of the strategy. I don't want any distractions." Lyra didn't respond with words. Instead, she simply walked to one of the side consoles, where a technician was already working furiously to track the incoming ship. Ethan, still standing in the doorway, could only watch. It was hard to ignore the way Lyra moved, the fluidity in her steps, as though she was in perfect control of her surroundings. She seemed so composed, so in control, that Ethan felt as if he were the one who didn't belong here. A few moments passed before Lyra's voice broke through the tension. "The Skravok ship is using advanced cloaking technology," she said, her voice cutting through the air with authority. "They're hiding their true position, but I can help you track them." One of the officers looked up from the control panel, his eyebrows raised. "You can do that?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, my people have advanced sensory technology. I'll sync my device with your sensors." Ethan watched, fascinated, as Lyra's fingers moved with expert precision, typing commands into the console. A soft light seemed to emanate from her fingertips as she manipulated the ship systems, her calmness almost unnerving. Within moments, the Artemis's sensors began to shift, and the image of the Skravok warship appeared on the screen in front of them. "It's cloaked, but the energy signature is still detectable," Lyra explained. "I've enhanced the signal. You should be able to target them now." The captain stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Well, I'll be damned. This could be a game changer." Lyra's eyes never left the screen. "It's only the beginning. The Skravok are good at what they do, but they're not unbeatable. We just have to outsmart them." Ethan couldn't help but be impressed. She wasn't just some diplomat. Lyra was a strategist, a tactician. She had a mind that could analyze situations and turn the tide in an instant. It was no wonder the Zarek had been entrusted with such an important role. And as much as Ethan had been nervous about the situation, he now felt a sense of trust in Lyra. If anyone could lead them through this, it was her. The battle wasn't going to be easy, but they had a chance now. And that, Ethan realized, was all that mattered. As the minutes passed, the tension on the bridge mounted. The Skravok were preparing for an attack, and the Artemis had to act fast. Captain Ives barked out orders, his voice sharp and commanding as he coordinated the crew. Lyra, standing at the side, was calm, composed, and quiet. But Ethan could feel the energy around her, an energy that wasn't just one of diplomacy but of sheer willpower and strength. They were ready. The Skravok ship finally revealed itself in full view, a hulking vessel with sharp angles and dark metallic surfaces. Its weapons were charged, its engines thrumming with energy. It was an intimidating sight, one that could strike fear into the heart of any soldier, but not Lyra. Without warning, she turned to Captain Ives and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Target their engines, disable them. Do not destroy the ship. We need information." The captain's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment there was an unspoken understanding between them. "Fire when ready," he said, and the Artemis's weapons fired with pinpoint precision. The battle that followed was intense, but thanks to Lyra's guidance, the Artemis's defenses held strong. The Skravok ship attempted to fight back, but it was no match for the Artemis's technology. With every move, Lyra's strategies proved to be invaluable. The Skravok, frustrated and unable to land a significant blow, eventually retreated, their ship turning away and fleeing into the dark expanse of space. The crew erupted in cheers, but Ethan couldn't help but look at Lyra. She had saved them, and she had done it with such grace and ease. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation. She had been a leader when they needed one the most. Lyra turned to Ethan as the crew celebrated. "You see, Ethan, humanity's strength lies not in the weapons you build, but in the way you come together when it matters most. You're a resilient species." Ethan couldn't help but smile. "I think we've got a good mentor in you." She smiled back, the glow of the stars outside reflecting in her eyes. "Perhaps, but remember, Ethan, this is only the beginning." The battle was over. The Skravok had retreated, their warship vanishing into the void of space, leaving nothing but the faint trace of their energy signature. The Artemis had won, but there was no celebration, no moment of rest. The ship was on high alert, the crew still tense from the near attack. Ethan felt the exhaustion creeping into his bones, but he knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. He stepped out of the bridge, taking a deep breath as he tried to calm his racing heart. The ship's emergency lights had dimmed to normal levels, and the usual hum of the engines filled the air. Everything was back to its routine, but the events of the past few hours still hung in the air like a thick fog. Ethan's mind was spinning with thoughts of what had just happened. The Skravok had been a real threat, but Lyra had led them through the crisis with an unmatched calmness, and her strategies had worked flawlessly. As he walked down the hallway, heading to his quarters, he couldn't help but replay the battle in his mind. He remembered the way Lyra had taken control, how she had analyzed the situation with incredible precision, and how she had trusted the crew to execute the plan she had devised. There was no doubt in Ethan's mind anymore. Lyra was far more than just a diplomat. She was a leader, a strategist, and someone who could take on any challenge with unwavering confidence. Ethan reached his quarters and stepped inside, the door closing behind him with a soft hiss. He collapsed onto his bed, his body tired but his mind restless. He had been a part of the crew for months, yet it had taken a crisis for him to truly realize the gravity of the situation. They were no longer just a crew of humans traveling through space. They were now a part of something much bigger, a galaxy of different species, some peaceful, some hostile, and some somewhere in between. He glanced at the small desk by the wall, where his work materials were neatly stacked. His usual routine, repairing equipment, adjusting systems, seemed trivial compared to the events of the past few hours. He had always been an engineer, focused on the technical side of things. But today, he had seen a side of space travel he had never imagined. He had seen the danger, the thrill, and the responsibility that came with it. The door to his quarters chimed, and Ethan sat up quickly, startled. It was rare for anyone to come to his quarters unannounced. He stood, straightening his shirt, and walked over to the door. "Come in," he called out. The door slid open, revealing none other than Lyra herself. She stood in the doorway, her posture still composed, though her golden eyes held a flicker of curiosity as she scanned the room. Ethan felt a sudden rush of warmth flood his face, but he quickly wiped it away, trying to appear calm. "Lyra," he asked, surprised, "what brings you here?" She stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a soft whoosh. "I thought you might need to talk," she said, her voice calm and steady. "You were on the front lines today, and I know how overwhelming that can be." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind still buzzing from the intensity of the situation. "I'm fine," he said quickly, though he wasn't sure if it was entirely true. "I just wasn't expecting all of this." Lyra gave him a knowing look. "None of us were, Ethan, but that's what makes us stronger. The unexpected is what shapes us. The Skravok may have retreated, but they'll be back, and next time we need to be ready." Ethan nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. He could feel the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. It wasn't just about surviving one battle, it was about being prepared for the next. The thought of more enemies, more challenges, felt both daunting and inspiring at the same time. "Do you think the Skravok will come back soon?" Ethan asked, trying to shift the focus of the conversation. Lyra paused, her expression thoughtful. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "The Skravok are relentless. They don't stop until they've gotten what they want. But we'll be ready for them, and I'm not just talking about our weapons." Ethan looked up at her, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Lyra walked over to the window, her fingers brushing lightly against the cold glass. The stars outside twinkled like distant diamonds, the ship floating in the vast emptiness of space. "I mean," she said slowly, "that what makes us strong isn't just our technology or our firepower. It's our ability to adapt, to think on our feet, and to work together. You saw that today. We didn't just rely on the ship's weapons, we relied on our minds, our strategies, and most importantly, our unity." Ethan frowned slightly. "Unity?" "Yes," she continued, turning to face him. "You, the crew, the diplomats, even the aliens we encounter, they all have a role to play. We may be from different worlds, but that's what makes us stronger. We have something that the Skravok don't, a shared purpose." Ethan's mind raced. He had always known about the unity of purpose in space exploration, the collaboration between different species. But it was different when Lyra spoke about it. She wasn't just speaking of diplomacy. She was speaking of something deeper, something that could bind people together across vast distances and different cultures. "Do you really think that's enough?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. "What if it's not enough? What if we fail?" Lyra's expression softened, and she walked over to him, standing just a few feet away. Her golden eyes met his, and for the first time, Ethan saw a hint of vulnerability in her gaze. "I don't believe we'll fail, Ethan. But even if we do, we will rise again. That's the strength of your species. You have this incredible ability to keep going no matter the odds. You don't give up. And that is something the Skravok or any other enemy will never understand." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. There was something about Lyra's words, something in the way she spoke that resonated deeply within him. She wasn't just talking about military strategy or tactics. She was talking about the essence of what it meant to be human. "We've already won, Ethan," Lyra said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because we didn't let the fear of the unknown stop us. We didn't let the threat of the Skravok break us, and that makes us unstoppable." For the first time in days, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The weight of the events of the past few hours didn't disappear, but Lyra's words gave him a new sense of perspective. He realized that no matter what happened next, no matter how difficult the challenges ahead might be, they had something the Skravok didn't: the strength to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward, and to do it together. Lyra smiled then, a small but reassuring smile that made Ethan feel as though everything would be all right. "You'll see," she said softly. "The universe is full of challenges, but as long as we have each other, we'll overcome them." Ethan smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Thanks, Lyra. I think I needed to hear that," she nodded. "We all do." As she turned to leave, Ethan stood at the window looking out at the stars. He realized then that the journey wasn't just about surviving in space or defeating enemies. It was about the connections they formed, the people they trusted, and the strength they found in each other. The universe was vast and full of unknowns, but Ethan no longer feared it. He was ready for whatever came next, because, with Lyra's guidance and the unity of the crew, he knew they could face anything. Ethan awoke to the soft hum of the Artemis, the ship's engines already running at full capacity. The previous night's events seemed like a distant dream now, but the weight of the reality they had faced still lingered in his mind. The Skravok had retreated, but the victory felt temporary. The galaxy was full of threats, and this was only the beginning. Lyra's words echoed in his head. "We will rise again." He sat up in bed and rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the lingering exhaustion. The events from the battle were still vivid in his memory. Lyra's calm control, the way she guided them through the chaos. He had seen her as more than just a diplomat. She was a natural leader, someone who could see beyond the present and anticipate the future. And as much as he wanted to ignore it, he realized that in the grand scheme of things, his role had just become much bigger than fixing machinery and patching up circuits. Ethan stood and stretched, the quiet hum of the ship accompanying him as he dressed in his usual jumpsuit. He had a lot to think about, but there wasn't much time to reflect. The Artemis was still on high alert, and even though the Skravok had retreated, their presence had left an undeniable scar on the crew. Everyone knew that it wasn't over yet. He headed to the mess hall, hoping to find some breakfast and perhaps some semblance of normalcy in the midst of all this chaos. The room was bustling with crew members, each of them talking in hushed tones, their eyes occasionally flicking to the large windows that offered a view of the stars. There was an underlying tension in the air, but it wasn't the kind of tension that would break people. It was the kind of tension that would unite them. Ethan grabbed a tray and moved to one of the empty tables. His mind was still preoccupied with the conversation he had had with Lyra the night before. He had always thought of space as something vast and unknowable, a place where humanity could venture into the unknown and explore. But now, after the attack, he was starting to see it differently. Space wasn't just vast, it was dangerous. And for humanity to survive, they needed more than just technology. They needed unity. They needed strength. Lyra had given him a glimpse of that strength. In the face of the Skravok, she had shown him what true leadership looked like. She wasn't just a diplomat trying to broker peace. She was a strategist who understood the importance of adaptability, of knowing when to fight and when to wait. And as much as Ethan admired her, he also knew he had to be more. He had to become something greater than just an engineer. The universe was full of challenges, and the crew of the Artemis needed every bit of strength they could muster. Just as he was lost in thought, a soft voice interrupted him. "Mind if I sit?" Ethan looked up to see Lyra standing beside the table, her golden eyes looking down at him with a slight smile. She was dressed in her usual outfit, elegant, yet practical. He gestured to the seat across from him, offering her a place to sit. "Of course," he said, his voice betraying his surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lyra sat down, her movements graceful as always. She picked up a small piece of fruit from the tray in front of her and took a slow bite, clearly at ease despite the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. "I thought you could use some company," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I've been reviewing the data from yesterday's battle and I wanted to talk to you about something." Ethan nodded, his curiosity piqued. "What about?" Lyra leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes studying him intently. "You've been through a lot. I know you're trying to process everything that happened, but I want you to understand something." Ethan met her gaze, his stomach tightening. He had a feeling he knew where this was going. "What do you mean?" "I mean that yesterday you saw what it means to fight for something greater than yourself," she said, her voice low and steady. "The Skravok were a threat, yes, but they weren't just an external force. They're a reminder. A reminder that humanity, despite its achievements, is still vulnerable, and that's why we need to come together, not just as individuals but as one. Ethan didn't know what to say. He had always known that the galaxy was full of dangers, but hearing it from Lyra, someone who had lived through countless encounters with alien species, made it feel so much more real. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," Ethan admitted, his voice quieter than he intended. "I'm just an engineer. I fix things I didn't sign up for, all of this." Lyra gave him a soft smile, her expression warm but serious. "None of us signed up for it, Ethan, but we're here, and that means we have a responsibility to each other and to the future. What we're doing here on the Artemis is bigger than any one of us, but if we want to survive, we have to be willing to fight for it." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always thought of himself as someone who fixed things, someone who could contribute in small, practical ways. But now he realized that his role had grown. He wasn't just fixing circuits anymore. He was a part of something much bigger. And whether he was ready or not, he had to step up. "I know it's hard to believe," Lyra continued, "but you're already a part of this. You've shown yourself to be capable, Ethan. You may not have the experience of someone like me, but you have something even more valuable. You have the ability to adapt, to learn, and that's what will make you invaluable when the next challenge comes." Ethan listened to her words carefully, letting them sink in. It was hard to wrap his mind around the idea of being part of something larger, something that was shaping the future of humanity and the galaxy. He had always thought of himself as a small part of a larger machine, someone who did his job without much recognition. But now that job had changed. He had to see it differently. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I'll try. I'll do what I can." Lyra nodded, her smile widening just a bit. "That's all any of us can do." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The mess hall was quieter now, the crew still in various states of calm and tension. Ethan could hear the low hum of the ship's engines, the soft clinking of trays, and the distant voices of crew members as they talked amongst themselves. The tension from earlier had dissipated somewhat, but it was still there, lingering beneath the surface. Ethan realized that he wasn't the only one struggling to process everything that had happened. The entire crew had been affected by the Skravox attack, but in different ways. Some were focused on the technical aspects, repairing the damage done to the ship. Others were focused on preparing for the next attack, strategizing and planning for what was to come. But no one was untouched. The threat of the Skravok had shaken them all, and even though they had won, they knew it wasn't over. The door to the mess hall opened, and Captain Ives stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. His stern expression softened slightly when he saw Lyra and Ethan sitting together. He nodded in their direction but didn't approach. Instead, he walked over to the counter and began talking to one of the officers. The room quieted for a moment as everyone turned their attention to him. Ethan could see the captain's shoulders tense as he spoke, his voice low and serious. It was clear that the Skravok's presence was still on everyone's mind, but what struck Ethan most was the way the captain interacted with Lyra. There was no tension between them, just a mutual respect. It was as though they had been through so much together that words weren't necessary anymore. Lyra caught Ethan's eye and gave him a small smile. "See, we're all in this together, and together we're stronger." Ethan looked at her, his thoughts clearer now than they had been before. He still wasn't sure what his future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone. And that was enough to keep him moving forward. The universe was vast and unpredictable. But humanity had something that no enemy could take from them: unity. And with that unity, they would rise again, no matter what challenges lay ahead.